If you're new here, smash that like button and subscribe to the channel for more stories just like this one. You see, family can be the greatest gift, but sometimes it can be your greatest curse. I learned that the hard way. It started with a whisper, a condescending sneer from the woman my son called his wife. "Just sign the papers, old man," she'd said, her voice dripping with a sickly sweet poison. "It's time for you to go into a home. Mark and I need the space, and frankly, you're becoming a burden, a burden." After everything I had done, everything I'd built, I was a burden. She thought I was a doddering old fool, a relic to be discarded. My own son stood beside her, his gaze fixed on the floor, a puppet whose strings she pulled with gleeful malice. They thought they had me cornered. They thought the game was over. They had no idea I was the one who had built the board, written the rules, and was about to checkmate them in a way they would never see coming. My story isn't just about betrayal, it's about justice. And trust me, you're going to want to hear how it ends. It all began, as these things so often do, with love. My wife, Martha, was the architect of my world. We met when we were little more than children, with pockets full of lint and heads full of dreams. I was a carpenter's apprentice, my hands rough with splinters, and she was a waitress with a smile that could outshine the sun. We saved every penny. We built our first small business, a bespoke furniture shop, from the ground up in our own garage. I remember the smell of sawdust and varnish mingling with the scent of the cheap coffee she'd bring me. Her presence a silent promise that we were in this together. That little shop grew, slowly at first, then with a momentum that surprised even me. It became a respected brand, known for quality and integrity, the very values Martha and I lived by. We poured our sweat and our souls into that business, not just for us, but for the future we envisioned, for the family we hoped to have. And then Mark was born, our son. He was the center of our universe. Martha and I swore he would have everything we never did. He would never know the gnawing ache of an empty stomach or the sting of a winter without a proper coat. We gave him the best education, supported his every whim, and when he stumbled, we were always there to catch him. Perhaps that was our first mistake. We made his path too smooth, cleared too many obstacles from his way. We taught him how to succeed, but we never taught him how to struggle, how to value the fight. Martha passed away 10 years ago, a cancer that came on fast and cruel, stealing the light from my life. Her absence was a chasm, a physical ache in the house we had built together, in the life we had so carefully crafted. The scent of her rose garden, the feel of her favorite armchair, the echo of her laughter in the hallways. It was all a constant, painful reminder of what I had lost. I threw myself into my work, into the foundation we had started in her name, the Martha Rose Foundation, dedicated to helping young artisans get their start, just as we had. Mark was in college then, and I made sure he never had to worry about a thing. His tuition, his rent, his car, it was all taken care of. When he graduated, I gave him a cushy, high-paying position in the company, a role he was not nearly qualified for, but one I hoped he would grow into. He seemed grateful, always quick with a "thanks, Dad," but there was a distance there, a lack of the grit and passion that had fueled me and his mother. He saw the business as an inheritance, not a legacy. Then he met Amelia. On the surface, she was perfect, beautiful, charming, intelligent. She lavished me with attention, calling me Dad from the very beginning, praising the home I'd built, the business I'd created. She seemed to adore Mark, and for a while, I saw a spark in my son I hadn't seen before. I was lonely, grieving, and I wanted to believe in their happiness. I wanted to see my son build a life as joyful as the one I'd had with Martha. So, I ignored the little red flags. The way her eyes would catalog the value of the paintings on my walls. The casual, probing questions about my estate, disguised as innocent curiosity. The way she would gently steer Mark away from his own ideas and towards more expensive, materialistic pursuits. I paid for their lavish wedding. I gave them a down payment for their first house, a ridiculously oversized McMansion they couldn't afford. I thought I was investing in my son's happiness. In reality, I was funding the architect of my own destruction. My health scare was the turning point. It wasn't major, a simple fall in the garden that resulted in a broken wrist and a few bruised ribs. I was 68, but I was still strong and sharp. However, Amelia treated it like a terminal diagnosis. She descended upon my house with a manufactured cloud of concern. "Oh, Dad, you can't possibly manage this big place on your own anymore," she cooed, her voice a symphony of false sympathy. "Mark and I have been so worried. We decided to sell our house and move in with you. To take care of you." Mark stood behind her, nodding like a bobblehead, his expression a mixture of guilt and resignation. I was still in pain, my judgment clouded by medication and the shock of the fall. It seemed, at the time, like a reasonable, even loving suggestion. I was lonely, and the thought of having family around, of hearing life in these quiet halls again, was seductive. I agreed. It was the worst decision of my life. The transformation was immediate and insidious. At first, it was small things. Amelia redecorated the living room, replacing Martha's warm, classic furniture with cold, sterile modern pieces that looked like they belonged in a hotel lobby. She would help with my mail, and soon, important letters from my bank and my lawyer stopped arriving. She took over the cooking, preparing bland, unappetizing meals she claimed were for my health, while she and Mark ordered expensive takeout for themselves. My friends would call, and she would tell them I was resting and couldn't be disturbed. I was being systematically isolated, my world shrinking until it was confined to the four walls of my own home, a home that no longer felt like mine. I became a guest, a tenant in a life I had built. Amelia's tone shifted from cloying sweetness to open contempt. My opinions were dismissed with a wave of her hand. My requests were ignored. I was spoken to as if I were a difficult child. "Now, Dad, you know you don't understand these things," she'd say condescendingly when I questioned a large, unexplained charge on a credit card statement she'd taken over. "Just let us handle it." Mark was a ghost in his own home. He would avoid my gaze, retreating into his phone or his work whenever Amelia began her campaign of quiet cruelty. I saw the shame in his eyes, the flicker of the boy I once knew, but he was too weak, too thoroughly cowed by his wife to stand up for me. He had chosen his side. I wasn't a fool. I knew what was happening, but I was playing a long game. I let them think I was weak, that I was fading. I let them underestimate me. It was a strategy born of grief and a deep, simmering anger. They were desecrating the memory of my wife with their greed. They were turning our sanctuary into a prison. I would watch them from my armchair, my face a mask of placid confusion, while inside, my mind was a whirlwind of calculations. Every dismissive comment, every stolen piece of mail, every condescending look was a piece of kindling I added to the pyre I was building for them. I was just waiting for them to make their final, fatal move. And then, one Tuesday afternoon, they did. I was in my study, supposedly napping, when I heard their voices from the hallway. They were arguing in hushed, urgent tones, thinking I was asleep. "He has to sign it, Mark." Amelia hissed, her voice sharp and brittle. "Dr. Evans said it's all prepared. The power of attorney, the transfer of assets. We just need his signature. We'll tell him it's for his own good. Some tax thing he won't understand. I don't know. Amelia." Mark's voice was weak, wavering. "This feels wrong. He's my father. He's a senile old man who's sitting on a fortune," she snapped back. "A fortune that should be ours. Do you want to spend the rest of your life working in that dusty old company? Or do you want to live the life we deserve? He's had his turn. It's our turn now." There was a long pause. I held my breath, praying my son would find a sliver of his conscience. But all that came was a defeated sigh. "Okay," he whispered. "Okay, we'll do it tomorrow." I closed my eyes, a cold, hard clarity washing over me. The love I had for my son was eclipsed by a profound, soul-crushing disappointment. He was lost, and I knew then that I could not hold back any longer. The very next morning, my phone, which Amelia usually kept on a high shelf so I wouldn't lose it, buzzed on the nightstand where a sympathetic cleaner had left it. A text message glowed on the screen. It was from David, my lawyer and my oldest friend. The message contained only 3 words, but they sent a jolt of electricity through me. "Call now. Urgent." My heart hammered against my ribs. I knew this was it. Amelia and Mark were out for a brunch meeting, a thinly veiled excuse to meet with their crooked lawyer or that so-called Dr. Evans. I had a small window. I grabbed the phone, my hand surprisingly steady, and slipped out into the garden, Martha's rose garden, the one place that still felt like mine. I dialed David's number. He answered on the first ring. "Frank? Thank God. I've been trying to reach you for 2 days. Your son's wife keeps telling me you're indisposed." His voice was tight, with a professional fury I had rarely heard. "What is it, David?" I asked, keeping my own voice low. "It's bad, Frank. It's as bad as it gets. Mark and Amelia have filed a petition for an emergency conservatorship. They're claiming you're mentally incompetent, that you're a danger to yourself and incapable of managing your own affairs." The words hit me, but not with the shock he expected. They were merely a confirmation of the whispers I had overheard. "They have a signed affidavit from a Dr. Alistair Evans, stating you're suffering from advanced dementia," David continued. "They've provided financial statements they've clearly doctored to suggest you've been squandering your assets. They're trying to get full control, Frank. They want to liquidate everything. The business, the house, your portfolio. Everything." I looked at the beautiful, blooming roses Martha had planted, their petals of vibrant, defiant red. A cold, calm anger settled deep in my bones. The grief and helplessness I had felt for months evaporated, replaced by a crystalline resolve. "They've miscalculated, David," I said, my voice devoid of any tremor. "Badly." David was silent for a moment. "Frank, are you all right? What do we do?" "We do nothing," I said, a slow, predatory smile touching my lips for the first time in a year. "We let them proceed. We let them walk right into the trap I set for them years ago." "Trap? Frank, what are you talking about?" And so, standing there amidst my wife's roses, I began to explain. I told them about the cameras, the ones I had installed after a minor break-in 5 years prior. Tiny, discrete cameras, wired into a secure, cloud-based server. One in the living room, one in the kitchen, one in the main hallway, and one in my study. I had been recording them for the entire year they had lived under my roof. I had hours upon hours of footage. Amelia's venomous monologues about how much she despised me. Her detailed plans to sell off my possessions the moment I was out of the way. Her cruel mimicry of my supposed senility. I had video of her rifling through my desk, of her taking my mail. Most damningly, I had crystal-clear audio of her coaching Mark on what to say to the doctor, how to exaggerate my moments of forgetfulness, how to paint a picture of a man who had lost his mind. I had my son, on tape, agreeing to lie, to betray his own father for a life of luxury. "My God, Frank," David breathed into the phone. That's dynamite. It's more than enough to have the petition thrown out. We can sue them for everything they have." "No," I said firmly. "That's not enough. Having it thrown out is a victory. I want a complete and utter annihilation. I want them publicly humiliated. I want them to face consequences for every lie, for every moment of disrespect." "The hearing is when?" "A week from Friday," David said. "Good," I replied. "That gives us time. Now, listen carefully, David. There's more. There's the matter of the assets they're so desperate to get their greedy hands on." I then explained the masterstroke, the plan I had put in place shortly after Martha died, a plan born from a premonition that my son's weakness might one day be exploited. "The business, the house, the stocks, the bonds, they don't belong to me anymore, David." "Not really." I could hear his sharp intake of breath. "Years ago," I continued, "I transferred almost everything into an irrevocable trust. The sole beneficiary of that trust is the Martha Rose Foundation." David was speechless. An irrevocable trust was a fortress. Once assets were inside, they couldn't be taken out, not by me, not by anyone. I was the trustee, which meant I managed the assets and could live off the interest and dividends they generated. A very comfortable living, to be sure. But the principal, the vast bulk of the fortune itself, was untouchable. It belonged to the foundation. Legally, I was a man of relatively modest means. The multi-million-dollar empire Amelia was seeing was a mirage. She and Mark had spent a year tormenting and plotting to steal from a man whose pockets were, for their purposes, already empty. They forged documents to seize control of an empty shell, David finally said, a note of awe in his voice. Precisely, I confirmed. And at the hearing, we are going to let them perjure themselves. We're going to let them lie to a judge under oath about my mental state and about the nature of my finances. We will let them build their gallows as high as they possibly can. And then, when they're standing proudly on top of it, I'm going to personally kick the stool out from under them. The week leading up to the hearing was the longest of my life. I had to maintain my facade as a frail, confused old man, which was now harder than ever. My mind was sharp, whirring with strategy, and my heart was pumping with the cold fire of vengeance. I watched Amelia flit about the house, her eyes gleaming with triumph. She was already spending my money in her head. She talked openly on the phone with her friends about the gorgeous condo downtown she was going to buy, the European tour she was planning. She treated me with a new kind of dismissive pity, the kind one reserves for a problem that is about to be permanently solved. Mark, on the other hand, was a wreck. He couldn't look me in the eye. He was pale, jumpy, and drank far too much in the evenings. The guilt was eating him alive, but it still wasn't enough to make him do the right thing. He was a passenger in a car being driven off a cliff by his wife, and he was too afraid to grab the wheel. I decided to give him one last chance. It was more for me than for him, a final test to see if any part of the son I raised still existed. 2 days before the hearing, I found him alone in the garden. I feigned a moment of confusion, a technique I had perfected over the past year. "Mark, is that you? I was just thinking about your mother." His face crumpled. The mention of his mother was his kryptonite. "Hi, Dad," he mumbled, staring at his shoes. I reached out and put my hand on his arm. "She loved this garden so much," I said softly. "She used to say that roses were honest. They have thorns, but they never hide them. You always know what you're getting." I looked him directly in the eye, dropping the facade for just a second, letting him see the clarity and disappointment there. Honesty was so important to her, son. She would be so disappointed to see a man lie to get what he wants. Especially when he's lying about his own family. The color drained from his face. He knew. He knew that I knew. His mouth opened and closed like a fish, but no words came out. This was his moment. He could have broken down, confessed, begged for forgiveness. He could have chosen his father, his mother's memory, his own integrity. Instead, he pulled his arm away. I don't know what you're talking about, Dad," he stammered, before turning and practically fleeing back into the house. And with that, he sealed his fate. My heart broke for the last time for my son. The man I would face in court was no longer family. He was just the accomplice to my enemy. The day of the hearing arrived. Amelia, dressed as if she were attending a Hollywood premiere, in a sharp, expensive suit, her makeup flawless, a predatory smile fixed on her lips. Mark looked like he was heading to his own execution. He wore a rumpled suit, his eyes were bloodshot, and he couldn't keep his hands from trembling. I, on the other hand, allowed myself to be dressed by Amelia in an old, ill-fitting sweater, my hair left uncombed. I shuffled my feet as I walked. I looked every bit the part they had cast for me, a confused, helpless old man who was about to be put out of his misery. David met us at the courthouse, giving me a subtle, reassuring nod. He played his part perfectly, looking worried and out of his depth against Amelia and Mark's slick, confident lawyer, a man named Peterson who oozed smug self-assurance. We entered the courtroom. It was a small, sterile room. A judge, a woman in her late 50s with intelligent, weary eyes, sat at the bench. Amelia and Mark sat at one table with Peterson. I sat at the other with David. The proceedings began. Peterson laid out their case. He painted a heartbreaking picture of a beloved patriarch who had tragically descended into the fog of dementia. He spoke of my erratic behavior, my financial mismanagement, my inability to care for myself. He presented the affidavit from Dr. Evans, who I was not surprised to see was also present. Mark was called to the stand first. He could barely speak, his voice a choked whisper. Peterson led him through a series of questions, and with every lie, Mark seemed to shrink further into himself. "Has your father been forgetting things?" "Yes," Has he been confused about where he is or what date is? Sometimes, yes. Have you noticed large, unexplained withdrawals from his accounts? Yes, he lied, his voice cracking. Amelia was next. She was a master performer. She dabbed at her dry eyes with a tissue as she described her deep concern for my well-being. She spoke of how she and Mark had sacrificed so much to move in and care for me, only to watch me deteriorate. She lied with a fluid, convincing grace that was truly terrifying. We're only doing this because we love him, she concluded, her voice thick with fake emotion. We want to protect him. We want to protect his legacy. The judge looked at me with an expression of pity. The trap was set. It was my turn. David simply said, "Your Honor, we would like for my client, Mr. Franklin Thorne, to address the court." The judge nodded. "Mr. Thorne, you may speak." I rose slowly, deliberately, shuffling to the podium. I leaned on it for a moment, appearing weak. I looked at Amelia. Her smile was one of pure, unadulterated triumph. She thought she had won. I took a deep breath and began to speak. My voice, when it came, was not the weak, wavering mumble they expected. It was clear, strong, and filled with an icy calm that commanded the attention of everyone in the room. "Your Honor," I started, my eyes locked on Amelia and Mark. "For the past year, I have been a prisoner in my own home. I have been systematically isolated, emotionally abused, and gaslighted by my son and his wife. They have told this court that I am incompetent. They have told you that I am a fool. Today, we are all going to find out who the real fools are." A ripple of confusion went through the room. Amelia's smile faltered. Peterson shot up. "Objection, Your Honor. My client's character is not on trial here." "It is now," I said, my voice like steel. "Your Honor, I would like to address the matter of my finances, which my daughter-in-law seems so very concerned about." I turned to Amelia. "You believe my company, Thorne & Sons Bespoke, is worth upwards of $10 million, don't you, Amelia? You believe this house is worth another 3. You've been salivating over my stock portfolio. You spent a year plotting to steal a fortune." Her face was turning pale. "Well, I have some bad news for you. That fortune doesn't exist. Not for you anyway. You see, 9 years ago, after my wife passed away, I placed my entire estate, the company, this house, every last stock and bond, into an irrevocable trust. The Martha Rose Foundation," Peterson scoffed. "Your Honor, this is a desperate fantasy from a confused man, is it?" David said, standing up and placing a thick binder on the judge's bench. "This, Your Honor, is the certificate of trust legally filed and executed 9 years ago. As you can see, Mr. Thorne is the trustee, but he is not the beneficiary. He is, legally speaking, a man of very modest personal wealth. The assets my clients have been so desperately trying to seize simply are not, and never have been, his to give or for them to take." The judge's eyes widened as she scanned the first page. Amelia's jaw dropped. The color completely drained from her face, replaced by a blotchy, furious red. She looked at Mark, her eyes blazing with rage, as if this were somehow his fault. "But that's not all. Your Honor," I continued, my voice rising. "They didn't just lie about my finances. They lied about my mental state. They slandered me. They committed perjury in this very courtroom. And they brought in a so-called medical professional to validate their lies." I turned my gaze to Dr. Evans, who was now sweating profusely. "David, if you would." David nodded to an assistant, who set up a laptop and a large monitor facing the judge. "Your Honor," David said, "for the past year, my client has had a state-of-the-art security system in his home, a system he had installed himself. We have hundreds of hours of video and audio recordings. We'd like to play just a few short clips for the court." The first clip played. It was Amelia in my kitchen on the phone. Her voice was clear as a bell. "I can't stand it anymore, Trish. He just sits there, staring. I swear, if I have to cut up his food for him one more time, I'm going to scream. But it'll all be worth it. The lawyer says once the conservatorship goes through, we can sell everything. We'll be set for life. First thing I'm doing is selling this dusty old house and all this ugly old furniture." The next clip showed Amelia coaching Mark before his appointment with Dr. Evans. You have to tell him he gets lost on his walks. Tell him he calls you by his brother's name. He doesn't even have a brother. The doctor won't know that. You have to sell it, Mark. Crying will be a nice touch. The final clip was the most damning. It was from 2 nights ago, after my final attempt to appeal to my son in the garden. It was a recording from the camera in the main hallway. Amelia was screaming at Mark. What did he say to you? Don't you dare go soft on me now, Mark. We are 2 days away from everything we've ever wanted. Your father is a means to an end, an obstacle. And on Friday, we are removing that obstacle. Do you understand me? Mark's pathetic, whispered yes was audible to everyone in the silent courtroom. When the videos finished, there was a stunned silence. The judge stared at Amelia and Mark, her expression no longer one of pity, but of pure, unadulterated fury. Amelia was hyperventilating, her mask of sophistication shattered, revealing the greedy, vicious monster beneath. Mark had his head in his hands, sobbing uncontrollably. This hearing is over, the judge said, her voice dangerously quiet. The petition for conservatorship is dismissed with extreme prejudice. Mr. Peterson, I suggest you advise your clients to retain criminal counsel, as I will be referring this entire matter to the district attorney's office. I see evidence of perjury, conspiracy to commit fraud, and elder abuse. Dr. Evans, you can expect a similar referral to the state medical board and the DA. Now get out of my courtroom, Amelia finally snapped. She lunged towards me, her face contorted in a mask of rage. You old bastard. You ruined everything, she shrieked before the bailiffs intercepted her, restraining her as she thrashed and screamed obscenities. They dragged her from the courtroom, her threats echoing down the hall. Mark didn't even look up. He just sat there, a broken man, weeping for a life he had just destroyed. I walked over to him, not out of pity, but for a final closure. He looked up at me, his face a mess of tears and snot. Dad, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Please. I said, my voice flat, devoid of emotion. You're sorry you got caught. You stood by for a year and watched that woman disrespect me, isolate me, and plot to steal everything your mother and I ever built. You stood in a court of law and lied under oath to have me declared insane and locked away. You made your choice, son. You chose her, and you chose greed. The father you knew died the day you let her convince you I was a burden. Now, you have to live with that. I turned and walked away without a backward glance, leaving him to drown in the ruin he had co-created. I walked out of that courthouse and into the sunlight, feeling lighter than I had in years. I was free. In the months that followed, justice moved swiftly. Amelia was charged with multiple felonies. Faced with a mountain of video evidence, she took a plea deal and is currently serving a 3-year prison sentence. She'll be on probation for years after that. Dr. Evans lost his medical license and is facing his own legal battles. Mark was not charged. A small mercy, I suspect the DA granted due to his pathetic display in court, and perhaps a sliver of pity for his obvious manipulation. But his punishment is, in many ways, far worse. He lost everything. His wife, his job. I fired him the day after the hearing, and his father. He sends me letters, long, rambling apologies filled with regret. I read them, but I don't reply. Some betrayals cut too deep. The trust is gone, and without trust, there is no foundation upon which to rebuild. As for me, I have my home back. My life back. The house is once again filled with the warm furniture Martha and I picked out together. My friends visit often. The silence is no longer oppressive. It's peaceful. I've taken a more active role in the Martha Rose Foundation, finding immense joy in helping young, talented people build their own dreams, just as I did. My wife's legacy is secure, and it is doing good in the world. Greed is a poison. It rots you from the inside out, and it can destroy the most sacred of bonds. I learned that in the most painful way possible. But I also learned that you should never, ever underestimate the quiet ones. You never know what game they're playing or how many moves ahead they truly are. So what do you think? Did I do the right thing? Was my revenge justified? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this story of justice served, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more. Thanks for listening.